Okay, so the intro was really conceptual, which I find is the nature of a lot of advice that pertains to Dungeons and Dragons. There's a lot of talk about what without a whole lot of talking about how. So for this episode, I'm going to talk about how. Specifically, how I set up the infrastructure that supports my game. These tools are very useful for dungeon masters of groups that play in person as well as online, and the only thing that may change is the inclusion or exclusion of a virtual tabletop if you even choose to play on the grid versus doing theater of the mind. I'm going to divide this episode broadly into two parts. The first half will be the tools I use for organization and communication. The second half will be tools I use to create maps for both dungeons and the world as a whole. The main tool that I use for direct communication is Discord. Discord, for those who haven't used it, is a text and voice communication platform. It basically lets you set up your own server, populate it with the information you need your players to know. And really quickly, I'll just run through how I've got my Discord set up just to give an idea. The best advice I can give is always do what works best for you in your circumstances. I currently have Discord channels organized into three categories: discussion, in-game, content, and info. In the discussion channel, I have the general, which is just a catch-all for sharing and talking about whatever. Session scheduling for discussing availability so we can find a time to play. Briefing, debriefing, and sharing. So if you learn any in-game knowledge, this is your place to brainstorm and discuss out of character. It's the place for expedition leaders to talk about what they want to accomplish in their next session, or for everyone to just dialogue about the things that are happening, their priorities, etc. Magic item swapping. If you're a wizard who found a +1 maul and you want to get rid of it for gold or something someone else has that you want, this is where to do it. It goes without saying that you can, and I think probably should, hold off on making this channel until there are magic items found in your world. Introductions. This is just basic character info. If you're a new player, this is where you post your art and a little blurb. It's very surface level. Characters, which is a deeper character discussion that's not covered in introductions, which is just a place for, a quick profile. Then there's character build discussion, which is the place to pitch hypothetical characters, either for the game that I run or just in general. I know on one occasion I homebrewed the athlete background and put a PDF in there just to pitch that for some feedback. Other people have pitched homebrew or concepts for critique or notes. The channel grew out of necessity after this type of discussion became like 40% of everything that was in general. And the last text channel is LFG. So if you like playing with other people in the server and you like how they role play or strategize in combat or just how they run their character, this is the place to discuss running separate one-shots or campaigns with those people that you've become friends with. And the last channel is not a text channel, it's a voice channel. It's just a general voice channel. It doesn't get crazy traffic, but it comes in handy every now and then when you just need to hop in and just hash something out, and doing it over text is a bit clunky. The next category is the in-game category. The channels here are the Porterhouse, and this is a text channel that's named after an in-world bar that is owned and operated by a player character who goes by the name Porter. Thus, it is the Porterhouse. It is the in-RP text channel, RP roleplay, text channel for players to go back and forth in character at their leisure. In my opinion, this one is absolutely necessary. It gives players the opportunity to explore their characters without needing a dungeon master present. And the big benefit of this kind of thing to you as a DM is that you can control anybody who walks through that door. I've had couriers come with notes for PCs. I've had guards come in and arrest a player character. And the biggest shakeup was when a half-orc emissary walked in and announced the assassination of their chieftain. It's just as much of a tool for you as it is for them. I like to use it sparingly, but how you use it is totally up to you. The next text channel is the Officers Club, which is a private text channel for those with the role officer assigned to them in the Discord server. What this is a way for me to incentivize a greater variety of player characters to sort of lead expeditions. The way a player character gets this role is by organizing and leading an expedition into the wilderness. It doesn't get much use, but it's a nice little bit of extrinsic motivation to get that variety so the same 4 or 5 people don't end up kind of dictating everything that happens. And the last one is just dice rolls. I use the dice bot Avray, invite it into your server, and roll your dice here so that people just aren't rolling all of their die in the RP channel or in general, and it gets lost. For voice channels in this category, I have 2 channels for sessions. Once I had 2 games going, one run by myself and another that was run by a player who was filling in as a DM for a second group that could only run at the same time. And I just didn't get rid of the second one just in case it ever came up again. On top of that, I have a Whispers channel for when an NPC has a secret conversation with a PC. And last but not least is the info category. This is where you find the FAQ, which has the most things pertaining to the startup of the campaign. It's got a short overview of the setting, mechanical stuff, like you start at 3rd level, you make your character using point buy, my variant on multi-classing rules, and other variant rules like the things in the Dungeon Master's Guide that I'm a big fan of, the injuries table, the expanded combat action list, the massive damage rules, and how cover works, that sort of thing. Below this is the Stronghold FAQ, which is just information about how mechanically acquiring a stronghold works and what that benefit does for you, as well as the things that come with it, the troops, the stronghold actions, the domain effects. This is all strongholds and follower stuff by MCDM. I incorporate it into my game because I find it's fun to let players sort of conquer the wilderness in this sort of way. The next channel here is the current map. So every time an expedition happens, I go into paint.net and I just erase a little bit of the cover layer that's sitting on top of the completed map layer. And then I just re-upload it into that channel. And then below this, the character directory is it's a whole channel with just one link into it. And it is the link to an all-encompassing Google Sheet that contains 99% of the bookkeeping I do for the game in it. This is the only thing in that channel, which should tell you how important it is. Speaking of which, the next tool I use is Google Drive. The sheet that's linked in character directory is a Google Sheet, which is a spreadsheet made in Google Drive. The big advantages to this are that it's online and in browser. So I can have a tab open to it without switching windows and have a game going on in Roll20 at the same time. And the other big thing is link sharing. What you can do is set it so that anyone who has the link to this spreadsheet can edit it. So rather than having to collect info from everyone in the server individually, you can just send them the link or do what I do and post it in a channel with nothing else in it, and they can fill out all of their info themselves. Another cool thing about spreadsheets is the multiple tabs on the bottom you can use to separate stuff by dataset. These datasets are things like the player directory tab with info on things like class and level and XP total, the session log tab, an NPC directory tab, a location directory tab, the shop inventory, the wizard spell book tab, which is just a library containing the collective spell knowledge of every wizard in the entire server, a log of magic items and their owners, and eventually, if you choose to use the supplement, a directory of strongholds. Outside of this usage for myself and players, I use Google Drive separately to organize everything that's on my side of the screen. I have my own spreadsheet for locations and NPCs that I use. Each location in my world has a separate Google Doc that contains a write-up describing it and filling in the details of what would appear on the map. Each of these documents are titled by the 2-number hex coordinate on the world map. Also, you can upload images to Google Drive, which I do for the maps of each individual location. these files are titled the same way as the documents that they correspond to, in addition to being in my Roll20 library, so that when I look it up, the document for hex number 216 is describing the map that is also titled hex number 216. Roll20 is the last sort of big in-browser thing that I use. It is a free-to-use virtual tabletop, even though there are paid subscriptions that grant you access to, more and more features. The base level of Roll20 is free, and it's just fine. Go to roll20.net, make an account, boom, you're done. There are other virtual tabletops out there. If you already have one that you use and you'd rather use that, go for that. But I'm going to tell you why I personally like Roll20. It's free, which you can't really beat that. The barrier of entry is owning a computer. And if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons online, you got that probably already sorted out. As a dungeon master, you can upload images to use as battle maps. It's got an initiative tracker, and you can obscure parts of the map to gradually reveal it as the players go along. You can draw on the map pretty easily, and it's got a solid set of free assets for you to use for on-the-fly random encounters. All right, that concludes the first little set of tools that I use. The next set, as I said, will be the things that I use to make maps. I use three main things for map making. I use Dungeonographer for small stuff, Worldographer for big stuff, and Paint.net for editing. All of these are going to need to be downloaded for you to use. Now, these programs aren't your only options. They're just what I use, and they're free. Dungeonographer is very basic. You get a grid, you get lines, you get some small little tokens that stand in for objects like doors, carpets, bookshelves, barrels. I like the minimalist look of just lines on a grid because it allows for detail to be filled in descriptively without any aesthetic clash between the visual of the map and the description that I'm giving. And because the map, the description, and the contents are all 100% in my control from start to finish, I can include ties from each to the other to really tighten up the feel of the dungeon. I much prefer this to browsing the battle map subreddit for something that is visually really nice looking, but that I also then have to work around when filling my dungeon. Why would a trap go here, or why would this be there, or why would this monster go here, are not questions that I have to answer for myself when I can design the dungeon around the answers. For big stuff, I use Worldographer. I use it for the overworld and for any large areas like the Underdark. It's a hex map maker that comes with a bunch of pretty intuitive terrain hexes. It's got sprites to place in hexes that denote their contents. It's got a note-taking feature. For me, the big thing is to make sure you have the coordinates turned on so each hex has a unique identifier. Whenever I ask my players what they want to do for an upcoming expedition, I always try to get the hexes from them in terms of the coordinates, so there is absolutely no ambiguity about what they want to do. Another cool feature this has is it lets you to work on maps in tabs, which makes it easier when lining up the entrances of the Underdark to the overworld, for instance. And the last map making tool I use is Paint.net. Don't let the name fool you. Paint.net is not an in-browser tool. It is very much a standalone program. And for a free image editor, it's pretty powerful. What I use it for is keeping the map a secret. The way I do this is with layers on Paint.net. You get a base layer that is your completed map, the one that's filled in with everything that you want in it and where. And on top of this, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to make an identically dimensioned blank map that has the hexes and the coordinates in it. You just then put this on another layer on top of this. Optionally, you could put a translucent texture on top of this, such as parchment, to give it a cool aesthetic. Find out what level of translucence still gives you the texture while still being able to read the hex coordinates, and just merge it down onto the cover layer. Then, as your players explore outwards from the central area, you gradually erase the cover on the hexes that they have explored. What this does is it creates a really cool log of players pushing further and further into the frontier. Each time the map gets updated, I post the updated one in the current map channel on Discord. And that about does it for the tools that I use to bolster my game. I hope this has been helpful. Be sure to check out my Instagram, Marching West, for between episode updates and behind the scenes stuff. I retweet things sometimes at West Marching on Twitter. If you want to send me a message, you can reach out to me via those. If you listen to podcasts on Anchor, you can send me a voice message. In the next episode, I'm going to go a little bit deeper into setting, world building, and map making in what is to be titled Episode 3, The Map and the Territory. Until next time, I'm Billy Frederick, and this has been Marching West.